Hello everyone, this is episode 71, and I'm just putting a little bit of a warning message before it starts because this episode is very echoey. And it's because my mic setting has an echo button, or echo knob, and it shouldn't. And sometimes it's slightly turned on, and I don't figure it out until I go and edit an episode. And I can't figure out how to remove the echo, so sorry for the bit of echo. Hopefully it's not too distracting for you. But yeah, fair warning, there's some echo here. Thanks for listening.
Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and they'll either be read in the podcast or the column anonymously. Please send your questions to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and they'll either be read in the podcast or the column anonymously. If you would like to read the columns and listen to the podcast, you can go to nonmonogamyhelp.com, subscribe to our newsletter by going to go.nonmonogamyhelp.com/email, and follow us on Twitter at nonmonogamyhelp. And we actually do have an Instagram at nonmonogamyhelp. By the time this comes out, I'm pretty sure you would know that I have an Instagram, but I keep forgetting to put this in, so I will definitely mention it in the future and in the past. Anyway, if you would like to support the columns and podcasts, please consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month helps support the daily running of the columns and the podcast, and it just shows a general vote of support. You can do that by going to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. If you donate $5 or more a month, your name with your permission will be read at the end of the podcast. Let's get to this week's discussion question, shall we? If this is the first time you're hearing this, every week before I read the letter, I put forth a discussion question that you can use with your friends, partners, metamours, anyone else that you would like to get to know a little bit more. I also answer it myself very, very briefly to give you a little bit of context. This week's discussion question is: how do you introduce the topic of STIs to someone that you are interested in dating or sleeping with? And so for me, I try to ask this as soon as I possibly can. And the best way I found of going about this is going, just so you know, this is how often I'm tested, yada, yada, yada. And I think that is a lot easier for a lot of people than going like, so do you get tested for STIs? Do you have an STI? Do you have anything to tell me? I think that is way easier and doesn't put people on the spot, because it shows them that you're volunteering the information, and then they can volunteer their information. And then if they don't volunteer their information, it is kind of awkward for them, but at least that gives them some leeway to start doing it. And then you can then, if they don't want to say anything, be like, well, I only sleep with people who are willing to talk to me about STIs, etc. and so forth. So yeah, that's what I do. So let me repeat the discussion question again. How do you introduce the topic of STIs to someone you are interested in dating or sleeping with? Let's get to this week's letter. My boyfriend, 26, and I, 21, have been together for 3 years. We are in an open relationship where we both have given permission to sleep with other people. As a couple, we talk about and fantasize about being with other people, both together and separately. Neither of us have found the right situation until now. I used the Field app and found someone who has consented to the situation and with meeting up with me alone and with both of us together. I was excited, and when I presented this to my boyfriend and asked if we could meet for drinks, he told me he didn't want me talking to and develop relationships with other people. To me, that's understandable and not at all unreasonable. However, the issue there is that I've never just hooked up with anyone. I need some sort of connection before sleeping with someone. I have no intentions of having emotions involved to fill any sort of role that is currently filled by my boyfriend with anyone else. I just want casual sex, but I feel the need to get to know new partners. He doesn't seem to understand and isn't willing to compromise on that. Not that I feel like we should if he is truly uncomfortable with it. My question is, does this mean we should just close our relationship and move on? I'm not against that, but I would be a little disappointed, as this has been the basis of my fantasies for years. Before we get to this week's answer, I'm going to quickly plug this episode's sponsor, BetterHelp. quite often in a lot of my columns and podcasts, I encourage people to seek a polyamory-friendly therapist, and for a lot of people, looking locally for a therapist who might be supportive of polyamory or even understand it can be impossible or out of their budget. BetterHelp allows you to find therapists online that you can send messages to any time of day, and it does offer some financial aid if you need it. You can get 10% off your first month by using the promo code non-monogamy-help at checkout or going to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy-help. Let's get to this week's answer. Okay, the issue here is that friends go out for a drink together. Friends have emotions and feelings towards one another. If he doesn't want you to develop relationships with other people, I mean, I know that he means a relationship, right? He doesn't, but a friendship is also technically a relationship in the broadest sense of the term. It's totally understandable if for him he can meet someone with little to no conversation and get busy. That's fine. Not everyone else is necessarily like that, and you are not like that. And I don't think that it's unreasonable to want to just meet and have drinks. And I'm guessing you're gonna find a lot of people. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if in random clubs and stuff like that, like maybe you will find more people who are cool with like just randomly hooking up without at least having a little bit of a conversation first. But generally speaking, I would say within the polyamory universe, and most people want to have like a chat and get to know each other a little bit. I really don't think that is developing a relationship, right? Like you chat and have drinks with coworkers, and you're not necessarily developing long-term deep partnerships with coworkers. I mean, maybe you do, but that's not a huge ask. So I think you need to have a bigger discussion, because what happens if you do develop feelings for somebody? Because even if you were to follow these very, to me, a little bit odd rules, but okay, it's his rule, that's how he wants to do it. Just because you don't have a conversation with somebody doesn't necessarily mean you can't develop feelings for them. Sex sometimes creates feelings, and especially if this is something that you've been fantasizing about a lot, you can develop feelings. So, and what does that mean? Like, because I think people say that, but what it means to have, quote unquote, have feelings is a very subjective emotional experience, which I don't think is necessarily the same for every single person on this planet. Like, does he just not ever meet up with drinks with somebody unless he definitely wants to have a relationship with them? Because if that's how he does things, fine. But it's clearly not how you do things. And what this kind of means in a lot of ways is that there's kind of a feeling of a lack of trust, that he doesn't trust you. I don't think he thinks that logically in his brain. He's not like, well, she's just going to go meet up with somebody and they're going to be married next week. I don't think he thinks that. But this type of rule and this type of fear tends to come from two things. One is that he has an anxiety, understandably, of losing you. He doesn't want to lose you. So he is going to be afraid of you developing feelings for someone and ditching him. That is a totally understandable feeling. He can't control that. His making this rule is not going to be able to control that. You could meet someone at the grocery store and reach for the same mango and you both fall desperately in love. I mean, it doesn't happen to me. Could happen to you. I don't know your life. That could happen. You could meet someone at work who you chat with and you fall in love with. Unless he plans on keeping you locked up in a tower and not meeting anyone but you, and if he does, you should leave. He's not going to be able to prevent you from developing feelings for somebody. That's not controllable. So he has to understand that as much as he is afraid of that, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that makes total sense, he can't actually control that. And he certainly can't control that by making these weird arbitrary rules. Like, if anything, that's more likely to drive you away than it is, because if this is something that you really want to act on, and this is a thing that you feel like, well, if I don't do this, I have only one life, and so I need to find someone who will let me do this or who's interested in doing this. So, yeah, it's just, he can't really control his fear with that rule, and he needs to understand that. Then you both kind of need to understand what it is that you would like, what it is that, having feelings means. Because another thing that I think happens a lot when people open their relationship is that there's so many rules about, like, when you need to tell me when you have feelings for somebody, or I need to know, because people have a really understandable fear and anxiety that their partner will beat someone, be blown away, be like, oh, screw you, I'm gone, bye. That is totally understandable, and people aren't afraid of that in monogamy because they don't think it's going to happen, but it can totally happen in monogamy. Polyamory doesn't magically make that more likely to happen. Okay, understandably, like, someone having permission to go out and have dates with somebody is a little bit different, but somebody can fall in love with someone that they've just met and ditch you. Either one of you. That is something that can happen. So that is something that a lot of people fear, and so they try to create all these rules of, like, okay, I need to monitor the situation so that I can have the first sign that anything is wrong, and we can handle that. But you need to start from a base level of trust, right? It's sort of like if you started off in monogamy and you decided that you would each show each other all your text messages for the week. That's kind of the analogous rule. Like, when you start off in monogamy, you start off on a basis of trust, which means that you don't need to look at each other's text messages. In the same regard, you need to start off on a basis of trust. He needs to get that you are saying, hey, I'm prioritizing this relationship. We've both decided that the type of non-monogamy that we want to have is one where we are a primary type, and then we have other sexual fun experiments with other people, but there is no change from this primary type. And that's fine, and I would also encourage you to communicate that to other people so that they're aware that this is the hierarchy that you're working on, and they don't get upset, or will understandably know to not expect more from you. But you've both agreed on what you want, so now what you need to do is trust that that's what both of you want, and give yourself a little leeway, because going out with drinks with someone is not developing feelings. So, yeah. All right, to sum up, first things first, friends have drinks together. Having drinks is not developing a relationship with somebody. You need to have a bigger discussion about what that means within the context of your relationships, what you're going to do if you do develop feelings for somebody, and then also you need to remind him that he may have this fear, and you may have it too, you just may not have had it crop up just yet, that he might lose you, but he can't try to control that by making these arbitrary rules. Instead of you all making a rule that you won't fall for anybody else, you need to decide what you will do if that does happen, and that will actually help. You can't control your feelings, so it's important that you don't try to make rules that act as though you can control your feelings. So try to have trust in one another and talk about what will happen if the worst, quote unquote, should happen and you do end up having feelings for somebody else. So yeah, I hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to episode 71 of Non-Monogamy Help. If you want to be awesome, you can donate to our Patreon, donating $5 or more a month, and you can actually donate in your local currency now, which is great. It means that your name, with your permission, because I do get your permission first, will be read at the end of the podcast. This week's current patrons are Laura Boylan, Chris Albury-Jones, Duke, Ellen Robinson, Nikki Jones, and James Wartell. If for whatever reason you can't become a patron because life happens, and if you can take 5 minutes to log into iTunes, find the podcast, rate and review it, I would be super, super helpful, or I would be super grateful for that, because every review and rating helps us get a little bit higher on those very complicated podcasty charts, and I guess it means that iTunes will recommend us at some point. So yeah, it's a huge, huge help. It takes you 2 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, 2 seconds to 5 minutes. It doesn't take you that long, and please do that. Thank you. All right, that's all for this week. You will get a new column next Friday and another podcast episode in a fortnight. Thank you again for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our music has been provided by Chris Albury-Jones at albury-jones.com, and our podcast art was made by Dom Young at domduong.com. Thank you again for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our music was done by Chris Albury Jones at albury-jones.com. Our podcast art is done by Dom Duong at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.